Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Cool Vibes with Key. I'm your host, Kiara, aka Key, and sorry for the delay on this episode. It's been a rough summer, but season 3 is quickly coming to an end here soon, so I wanted to push myself to get the last few planned episodes done. So, thank you for joining me for this week's episode. It's all about perception, where we're going to be talking about the big 3 perspectives and how to use them to your advantage and how to break those negative thought patterns. So let's just dive right into it. Starting with pessimism. What is it? It's expecting those negative outcomes and focusing on the worst case scenarios. You're always anticipating failure, problems, and disappointment. This makes tasks seem more challenging, and it leads you to be very cautious and less likely to take risks or try new things because of that fear of failure or negative results. You're always thinking to yourself, this is going to fail, or I'm going to look bad, or I'm going to do bad, or a million other reasons of why you shouldn't do something. And on the flip side of that, you have optimism, where you're expecting those positive outcomes and focusing on the best case scenario. You're focused and believing on good things. So good things are going to happen, and challenges can and will be overcome because you can do it. This leads to a lot more of a proactive and enthusiastic approach to challenges, where you're more likely to take those risks and try new things because you're not afraid of that failure. You're focused on the best and you're telling yourself, I'm going to succeed. This is going to do good. This is going to go off without a hitch, and all of the different ways things can go right. And finally, we have realism. So that's seeing things as they are and focusing on a very objective understanding. You're not expecting the worst or the best necessarily, but instead you're focused on the facts. And it creates a very balanced view with a pragmatic view of life where you prepare for all the different possibilities and you're more adaptable to the circumstances changing. When you're focused on the facts, you're telling yourself, this can go this way or this can go that way based on X, Y, and Z. And here's what can go wrong and here's what can go right. And you're not really expecting either. So why is it important to have all 3? You need that balance. So when you put all 3 together, you can create a very resilient mindset that can make large tasks seem like a cakewalk. So you use pessimism for that risk assessment, all the different ways things can go wrong. And it helps you have that very cautious decision making because you are aware that there are bad outcomes that can happen no matter what happens. And it really helps you get ahead of problems because you're always anticipating them. And on the flip side of that, you have that optimism where you're adopting more of that positive mindset and you're encouraging yourself to keep going and keep pushing, which leads to an overall much less stressful situation because you're not dwelling on those negative thoughts. And finally, when you throw in realism, you have that really balanced set of perspectives. So you're using the pessimism, you're using the optimism, but then you bring in that pragmatic planning that comes with realism and the adaptability. And when you put all of those together, you can have this really strategic planning because you have your risk assessment, you have the motivation that comes from optimism, but then you have the actionable plans from realism. And you have that resilient mindset because you're balancing, the optimism with the realism to be adaptable. And this helps you do better. It helps you adopt that idea of continuous improvement mindset, because after the fact, you can use all three of these perspectives to reflect what went wrong using pessimism, what went right using optimism, and finally, you can create that realistic assessment using, you guessed it, realism. Now that we've covered all of the perspectives, you're probably thinking, how can I use them to break negative thought patterns, like I said in the beginning? Well, like I've stressed in this video and many of my other videos, it's all about balance. So you have to use that pessimism to identify those negative thoughts. But what's really important is that you don't allow yourself to sit in that negative thought pattern. You need to acknowledge it. It's part of your mindset and it's part of your perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also good, and you need to challenge those thoughts. So, how likely is that thought to happen? What supports that thought? Acknowledge it, but don't forget to challenge it. And use it as motivation to prepare and instead turn those thoughts into action. And then you have your optimism. And you have your optimism to counteract that negativity. So you need to practice the gratitude and force yourself to shift your mindset from everything that's wrong and everything that can go wrong to everything that's right and can go right. And there's so many ways to do this, but the most popular is journaling. You need to find the method that works best for you. And the method that works best for you is the one that you're going to get yourself to do when you're having those negative thoughts. So practice that gratitude and shift your mindset. Help yourself visualize the success and what you're going to do to achieve that, because you're ready to turn those negative, pessimistic thoughts into action. And then you need to be able to motivate yourself. And the best way to do that is by focusing on the good. Use, those positive affirmations. Tell yourself it's going to work out. Reinforce those positive thoughts to get yourself through a challenging time. And then finally, use that realism to ground yourself, ground your thoughts. Like I said, you need to challenge the validity of those thoughts. Do your fact checking, balance your perspectives, and use that realistic problem solving to get through that negative thought. Awareness and noticing and acknowledging those negative thoughts is the first step. And once you are aware of them, you can challenge them. Ask if there's evidence. Reframe that thought. Replace it with a more balanced perspective, or use just a very optimistic approach and just be like, everything could go wrong, or everything could go right. Maybe you're walking into a test and you've studied, but you're just getting down on yourself. I'm going to fail no matter what I do. Instead, you can flip the script on yourself. I'm going to do great on this test. You need to then, after you reframe, take your action. So take those practical, realistic steps to keep going, keep pushing. And then finally, support yourself. This could be, through those positive ideas, or it can be through talking to other people. Bring in those other perspectives to bring yourself balance. It's a never-ending cycle of always acknowledging and labeling your own thoughts. And it takes time and it takes work. So one of the things that I have done for this episode is I pulled some book recommendations that focus on cognitive behavioral therapy. So these are strategies that are going to reframe your thought process, help you stop those negative thoughts where they are, and learn the different ways to apply this to your own life, because there's so many different ways, and what might click for one person might not click for another. So all of these titles are slightly longer than I'm going to say, but I'll have the full titles in the descriptions. The first one is Mindset by Carol Dweck. And then, of course, the almighty, all favorite Atomic Habits by James Clear. And my final recommendation is The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. You have to remember that balance. And balance those can'ts with that can. Or you're always going to find yourself hitting a plateau rather than forcing yourself to grow. I hope you guys enjoyed that little rhyming scheme and this episode, and I hope that you join me for 2 more. That's the plan right now. 2 more episodes, personally impersonal, and an unannounced episode. But I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.